What's up, Dream Team? So another day, another 100 push-ups. Um, I'm gonna add a little bit of a variation now. I'm gonna start with doing 10 slow or a set of 10 slow push-ups, and then doing 10 regular push-ups. That way I can start getting a little bit more control and start doing different types of push-ups. So, anyways, we'll start there.
For this video, as I'm getting to it, is to underline how you actually do this stuff that creates the wealth, the empire, the status, all that stuff. And I think that this is where people get really tripped up. The reason I say that is there's kind of three elements to the goal, right? So you have the external result that you're looking for, which might be make more money, get a six-pack, whatever. You've got the processes, behaviors, activity that result in that goal, right, being achieved, which would be like doing the work. The third aspect is being the type of person who does those things. So basically identifying with those types of behaviors or being the type of person who does those types of activities, which then creates the reward, right? I think James Clear talks about this in his book, Atomic Habits, but there's a lot of behavior psychologists who've touched on this point, and you probably have heard be, do, have at some point in your personal development journey, and if you haven't, welcome to the game. And so one of the things, and this is what I wanted to give to you in this video, is a keystone habit that has served me very well, and
All right,
it's
10
been in retrospect explaining
slow
it to someone
push-ups.
else that I kind of had more clarity on it, which is why I'm sharing it with you. When I have something that I want that I do not have, so I have a desire, which means I've made a contract with myself to be unhappy until I get what I want, right? And so I have this thing that I want externally, and I think I've had enough experience with this to know that simply writing down the goal means nothing. And so I think this is contrary to common belief or practice, which is like people who write down their goals are more likely to succeed. Sure, I mean, having a direction is more likely to achieve them than not having a direction, so I'm not going to disagree with that. But here's an interesting statement that may hit you, which is that winners and losers have the same goals, right? Everybody in Olympics has the same goal. Everybody who's in business has the same goal, right? They want to increase how much money they're making, you sell more products, get more customers, etc. So the goals are actually not that unique. And so the fact that we're writing them down, sure, it's a first step because we have to have a direction in terms of what are we trying to accomplish, sure. But I think that what you'll see that is different, because if you look at two people with the same goals and one person achieves them and the other person hasn't, then it can't be having the goal that is the main driver of success, right? Right. And so then you dive a step underneath that and you look at what are the behaviors that created that goal. And now we get much closer to the things that are actually driving the progress. What gets more interesting, at least to me, is if we know the activities that are going to generate the result we want. So maybe it's we want to get more customers, which means we need to advertise more. And I use advertise by the definition of what the word actually means, which is to make known.
That's 25.
And so if we do activities that make our products and services known, like doing more private communications, which would be one-on-one reach outs, one-on-one cold calls, one-on-one DMs, one-on-one emails, etc., prospecting, or one-to-many, so public communication, which would be broadcasting across different platforms for media, right? So you have radio, you could have an email list, you could have, actually that would be an example of a high version of scale of the original, so I apologize there, but like making posts on social media, things that are public forum where people can find out about it, right? If you do more of those things, more people will find out. And that would be the activity that's associated with getting more customers, right? But the thing is that people will know what that activity is, right? They will know that inherently they should be doing more of it, and yet they don't. And so that is kind of the purpose that I wanted to drill down in this short video today, is why not, and what is the way that we can try and correct that or fix that? I wanted to give you the simplest single hack that I have used inadvertently and seen a tremendous amount of success. That is asking myself the question, what would a person who does this type of thing do in this instance? The one that I'll tell you that I've repeated a lot to myself over the years, probably over the last 5 or 10 years, has been the repeated chorus of, what would a wise man do? I think it's because I did not consider myself to be very wise, and I acted many ways that were unwise earlier on in my life, and I still continue to do so, but I try to do less of it, right? And I think that, and I'll borrow this again from James Clear's book, your
Spin Boost raised my credit score by 12 points instantly, which is insane.
So I raised my score by 21 points.
identity is much more of a weighing system. Actually, that's not from this book, but like it's much more of a voting system where you cast votes in either direction based on your activities of what type of person you want to become. And I think the simplest distillation of that concept is simply asking the question, what would this type of person do? If you can use that as the refrain, that you come back
That's
to
funny.
over and over again, the chorus of your day that gets repeated over and over again. I think it's much easier than trying to remember the 50-point checklist of all the activities that you need to do to achieve the goal. And the friend that came back in my life, where we were having this conversation, I just distilled it down to like, what would a billionaire do? And so when we're confronted with these crossroads, right, you wake up in the morning and you're like, I don't know when I should start. It's like, what would a billionaire do? And so basically what you can do is have a certain refrain or chorus that you ask yourself, what would this type of person do? And that type of person, when you ask that question, is who you will eventually become as you continue to cast votes that reinforce the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are. And those are the things that create long-lasting, deep change. And what's more about this is that these changes, when they become internal, when they become ingrained in our behavior, they become effortless, but it takes time. And so I think that the mental cue that I have given myself inadvertently over the years, I don't have a lot of choruses that I refrain to or that I come back to over and over again. And so I tweeted about one and it got shared as a times, but is, what would someone 10 times smarter than me do in this situation, right? And a different way of saying that is, what would a billionaire do? And word it in whatever way that resonates with you. But I think rather than having that big checklist, you can put just a little post-it on your computer or wherever you work that's a reminder to yourself that this is the type of person I want to become. And in order to become this type of person, I need to do these things because those actions will reinforce the thoughts that I say about myself. Because the whole concept behind affirmations that I do not like, right, which is I am I'm a lion, I'm a tiger, I'm a whatever, right? Just saying them doesn't make them true unless you're a crazy person. And most of us are not crazy, I think, right? There's plenty of crazy people, don't get me wrong, but if you're probably watching this channel, you're probably at least semi-sane, right? If we have, this degree of sanity that's on our side, then what we have to do is create something else, which is evidence. We have to give ourselves evidence that we are this type of person in order to become that. But how do you have evidence that you are going to be this person when you have none? Well, it starts with activity. It starts with doing the stuff. And as an added corollary, depending on the goal that you have, it might be, what would a person with a six-pack do? What would a pro champion bodybuilder do? What would an amazing husband do? Or what would the best husband in the world do? And so you can use this framework of asking the question of what your ideal self would do in any given circumstance to apply to a vast number of scenarios. So rather than trying to fix for the habit, fix for the being, and then the habits will take care of themselves in accordance with the type of person that you have stated you wish to become. And so then the goals we have becoming the person we want to be. Once we know who we want to become, then that can direct the types of activities that will be in accordance with that. And the reason I like this better too is that if we're trying to reinforce an identity or an identity trait about ourselves, this is a really good habit, I think, that I've picked up over the years. But breaking down the etymology of words is really, really cool. And I think really teaches us a lot about the words we say. And words matter a lot because they are the things that encapsulate thoughts. A classic one, which is like, I didn't really like the word philosopher because I thought it sounded really fluffy. When I found out the etymology behind the word, which is phile, which is to love or to like, and then sophos, which is knowledge or wisdom, it's lover of wisdom. And I was like, well, shoot, I am a lover of wisdom. And so now I actually have a very positive association with the word. And to the same degree, identity comes from like, I don't remember the actual Latin word, but entity is being, right? Like just beingness in and of itself. And identical, which is repeated. So repeated beingness is what your identity is. So what your actions, what you do, literally becomes who you are, which means that we can actively change who we are by changing what we do. But it is a reinforcing circular path of like, I'm this type of person and therefore I do these things. And because I do these types of things, I am this type of person, right? And so it's the chicken or the egg, but at some point we need to take action in order to do that. And so I think the simple and easiest cue that we can use to change who we are, to change character traits that we find undesirable, is to simply ask ourselves when we're confronted with the decision, what would this type of person do? And then act in accordance to that. And I find it much simpler than having the lists and having the daily routines and the things like that, because if you are this type of person, you will do the types of things that that type of person would do, and that also comes down to the many decisions we haven't accounted for yet. You're going to be confronted with situations that you have not predicted. In fact, the vast majority of us don't predict things well in general. It's because there's far more variables than we can possibly comprehend. I think it's much more useful for us to think about ourselves in terms of, if I were to encompass all of the things that I would like to be, right? And that's why I think the what would Jesus do was such a powerful statement in the Christian community overall. And candidly, people outside of the Christian community could use that same exact thing, which what would Jesus do in this instance, and probably get the right activity and become more like Jesus, right? Which is the entire goal of the Christian faith. And if it makes it easier for you to think in a more tangible sense when you're asking yourself the question, I think the reason the Jesus thing was so powerful is that there's a very real identity that they're associating this decision with. The ones that I asked are, what would King Solomon do? Which he was considered, one of the richest and wisest men, which is why it's someone that I revert back to. And the other person that I asked myself was, what would they do in this situation, is Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. When I ask myself that question, and it depends on the scenario, which person I'm going to draw on to answer the question, depending on what suits best, what best suits the objective, etc. But I think if you don't know someone, then you can make it the value, or the version of yourself with that value, or you can just use an external person that embodies a lot of the character traits that you hope to have, and that can be equally as effective. So it just depends on who you are, but I think any of those are good strategies that you can employ to maximally use this kind of tactic for self-improvement and self-change. What we repeatedly choose to ask ourselves, which creates our identity, which then creates the tasks that we do and the activities we spend our time on, reinforces the story that we tell ourselves about who we are, right? Or what type of person we are. When I shared with this individual, I said, what do you want to become? And he said, a billionaire. It's like, cool, then what would a billionaire do? And always asking ourselves that question. And the reason that this was important, when I was talking to this individual, I'll read you the texts that I had said to him, because they got shared all over Instagram when I tweeted them or whatever, is that after he left, I said, here's a thought for you. So I was just like thinking about the conversation we had, and he had felt kind of shitty. And what's interesting about this is, like, as you level up in your life, and this is just an observation that I've had, is that, like, you will simply change who you compare yourself to. And I think Jordan Peterson talks about this in some talk he had, but I find it very true, which is you just change who you compare yourself to. And so you always find a way to make yourself feel terrible. And even if you're the best in the world and stuff, you'll just look at people who are better at other things than you and compare yourself to them to make yourself feel bad. This is what I said to him, and I'll share it with you. I said, every winner and every loser have the same goals. What separates them are the activities they commit to. Committing to the activities, that is the goal. So commit to the activities, that is the goal. When you make a lot of money one month, you've achieved nothing, because the goal is the activities. And then later I said, do me a favor. Instead of writing down your goals, just write down, what would a billionaire who lost it all do? Or what would a billionaire do, to keep it simple? Or whatever version of yourself you want to be. The doing and the outcomes will happen as a result of the main internal identity shift, which you can reinforce many times a day by asking yourself that question at each crossroad. And so I think that was relatively, I think it's a good point to end off on, which is the only tactical ask that I have for you is to simply write down, what type of person do I wish to become? And then make that the chorus that you recite to yourself when you're asking your crossroads.
That's 100.
Decision points that are going to be who you are on a repeated
So I've got a little saying.
day. And I think
It's
to that refrain will be all encompassing in terms of what would Jesus do applies to a zillion scenarios, but everyone.
Okay, so it's
Like the reason I'm
all right.
still taking it.
Sorry. Okay. So the saying is, I do it for you, I do it for me, I do it for we, the people, dream team. Let's go.